Thank you everyone for joining. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes before we get started. In the meantime, we'll have a few pictures up on the screen.
Good evening. Good evening, folks. We're just going to give it a few minutes more before we start the presentation.
Y buenas noches a todos. Solo vamos a dar unos minutos más antes de empezar la interpretación. Perdón, la presentación.
Boa noite, queria again, nos espera apenas alguns minutos antes de começar a interpretação.
Xin chào quý vị, chúng tôi sẽ bắt đầu sớm thôi. Xin cho chúng tôi thêm một vài phút nữa.
Good evening, folks. We'll be starting in just 1 minute. Thank you for your patience.
Boa
Buenas-
noite.
Go for it.
Boa noite a todos. Boa noite a todo alguém. Nuta começa dentro de pouco tempo. Obrigado.
Buenas noches. Vamos a empezar en un minuto y muchas gracias por su paciencia.
Chúng tôi sẽ bắt đầu trong vòng 1 phút. Xin quý vị tiếp tục chờ. Xin cảm ơn.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Nous pourrons commencer tout à l'heure. Merci pour patience.
Good evening, folks. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm going to pass the microphone on to my colleague, Sarah DeLude, who will walk through how we're going to handle interpretation.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah DeLude from the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. Good to have you with us tonight. It's very important that we have language accessibility for all of our residents to participate in this evening. So we do have live interpretation available in Spanish, Vietnamese, Haitian Creole, and Cape Verdean Creole. I'm going to invite an interpreter on to represent each of those languages to explain in those languages how to join the interpretation rooms. So if we can start in Spanish.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Erika. Estoy acá con mi colega Antonita. Vamos a estar interpretando. En unos segundos van a activar la interpretación. Si usted está usando su computadora, va a aparecer un globito en la parte de abajo. Presionen el globito y escojan español. Si está llamando desde su celular, hay 3 puntitos en la parte de abajo, en el lado derecho. Presione ahí donde dice más o more y luego escoja interpretación de idioma y también escojan español y finalizado. O sea,
And our Vietnamese interpreter.
Xin chào quý vị. Chúng tôi rất cảm ơn quý vị đã kiên nhẫn đã chờ trong vài phút vừa qua. Bây giờ chúng tôi sẽ bắt đầu buổi họp tối nay. Trước hết chúng tôi xin quý vị cho chúng tôi vài phút để sắp xếp cho các thông dịch viên vào kênh thông dịch, và nếu quý vị cần tiếng Việt xin chọn kênh nói tiếng Việt để nghe buổi họp trong ngôn ngữ của quý vị. Xin cảm ơn.
And Haitian Creole.
Pour choisir interprétation et faire en sorte que vous cliquez sur petit émoticône qui semble en globe blanc, cliquez sur lui et puis gardez descendre revenant créole haïtien pour qu'à joindre option ça. Sur notre téléphone, allez notre même petit globe là et puis cliquez sur option ou bien more options plus options et puis pour qu'à joindre là pour qu'à cliquer sur créole haïtien. Merci.
And finally, Cape Verdean Creole.
Boa noite, meu nome é Daniel Tavares, eu trabalho com colega de meu que é Sana. Para quem que quer ouvir interpretação na crioulo, tem globo que aparece na parte de baixo de tela. Nós clica naquele globo, depois nós escolhe língua, naquele caso ali crioulo. Se for num celular, nós temos 3 pontos, que naqueles 3 pontos nós clica, nós escolhe língua, crioulo de Cabo Verde. Obrigado.
Thank you. So give me one moment while I assign the interpreters into the interpretation rooms. So bear with me, folks. Thank you for your patience, folks. I think all the interpreters have gotten into the interpretation rooms. And so now over to you, Andrew. Appreciate your patience, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you everyone for your continued patience. We are ready now to begin the meeting very quickly. I'm Andrew Grace from the Mayor's Office of Economic Development at the City of Boston, and I am delighted to be here tonight, joined by the Working Advisory Group, our colleagues at DSNI as well. And I'm now going to pass the proverbial microphone to John Smith from DSNI and Chief Kara Elliott Ortega, Chief of the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Andrew. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here on Wednesday evening. Really appreciate all of you coming out to this meeting. I want to start by recognizing the members of the Working Advisory Group, some of whom are not here, but for the ones that are on the call. And just to say, really thank them for the effort that they've put in since this work has started, as you'll see back in 2017. So as I call your name, if you can just come on the camera and just, acknowledge. Margaret Leahy Worth. Margaret, thank you. Kid Binns. Hi, Kid. Joan T. Joan is here. Shay Madjun. Thank you, Shay. I know Maria Parker is here. And Alita Warren. Thank you, Alita. Thank you all so much for all your effort, and thank you all for being here to facilitate this evening. The ones who are not here this evening are Major Elvie Carter from the Salvation Army Kroc Center, Bob Haas, Val Daly is not here, and also Biplo Rai and Nora Valdez. So again, thank you all so much for participating and being here this evening. Cara?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here with you all. On behalf of the city, thanks for joining us for this update on the Upham's Corner Arts and Innovation District. A lot of excitement at City Hall right now since we have a new mayor as of yesterday, Mayor Michelle Wu. So I just want to mention that all of the city partners have been keeping this process front and center during the transition and will continue to do so. And we look forward to having many more opportunities to connect and engage now that the city's requests for proposals are out. So thanks again for being here. And I think now we're going to go into context or overview of agenda. Great, thank you. So we want to start with a reminder of what we mean when we say Arts and Innovation District. We mean our collective effort to reignite Upham's as a hub of creative activity. And it's about how we work together to support collaboration and economic opportunity between artists, residents, entrepreneurs, and businesses. And to center us again on our values that we've had throughout this whole process, they are development without displacement, so centering local residents as the people benefiting from and creating the Arts and Innovation District, creating affordable housing and commercial space, and supporting cultural spaces and activity. And that means a reinvigorated Strand Theater, a new Upham's Corner branch library, and it also means supporting spaces and organizations in the community like Fairmont Innovation Lab, Conservatory Lab Charter School, Humphrey Street Studios, Comfort Kitchen, and many more. So we're going to start this meeting by running through some updates on what's been going on in Upham's, both from the city perspective, the library and the Strand, but also other things happening in the community. And we're going to start with the Humphrey Street Studios, and the artists couldn't make it here tonight, which is actually good news because they're busy making work. So I'm going to give an update on their behalf. Humphrey Street Studios, if you're not familiar, is a arts studio space. It hosts 40 to 45 creatives working in furniture making, woodworking, sculpture, commercial graphic design, and many other disciplines. And over the last 2 years, the studio property was put up for sale, and the artists have run a preservation campaign both in Upham's Corner and more broadly, called Art Works Here, Art Stays Here, to keep the property as affordable artist workspaces in perpetuity. So we're really excited to share that after a lot of work on behalf of the artists and a lot of work on behalf of community organizing, the artists are partnering with New Atlantic and Place Taylor, who are working with the artists to actually purchase the property. So a purchase and sale agreement is pending right now. The plan is going to be to build affordable housing on the empty lot behind the artist studios, and also to build a shared community space within the studio building. So long-term, the artists will hopefully own the studios themselves. They're forming a tenants association and filing for nonprofit status so that they can support programming in the future in Upham's Corner, not just in their space, but in the community. And the artists just wanted to share that they're grateful for the support that they've received from everyone in Upham's Corner, from the city, and they're launching actually a coalition out of this effort to prevent artist displacement moving forward. And we'll share contact information if anyone wants to get in touch with them. The next update, and I'm going to try to speak more slowly, I'm sorry. The next update is on the Strand Theater. So we are really excited that we have a pretty booked season through summer 2022, which started with another round of partnering with Brighter Boston to provide youth training in theater tech. And you've probably seen the Van Gogh immersive experience is now up and running. They've rented the theater out and will be there through the holidays. And that has been a really interesting learning experience, both for us to see how the theater can be transformed and the space used differently, as well as some of the trade-offs for having a regional commercial show in the theater. And lastly, we're going to be putting aside some programming funding so that as soon as the Van Gogh show comes down, there will be financing for local groups that want to access the space. And with that, I will pass it on to Fairmont Innovation Lab.
Hi, this is Maria Parker from the Fairmont Innovation Lab. I'm actually the board president and acting executive director of Art Morpheus, which does business in Upham's Corner as Fairmont Innovation Lab, or FIL. Fairmont Innovation Lab, FIL, is a member of the Fairmont Cultural Corridor and has operated in Upham's Corner since 2015 as an incubator and accelerator for artists and creative and social entrepreneurs. We are currently operating from the DNICB, or the former Citizens Bank building on Columbia Road, and we manage a co-working space for small local businesses and creative enterprises. 2 times a year, we offer a 16-week accelerator program called the FIL Launchpad to provide technical assistance and mentorship to artists and creative entrepreneurs who are forming new businesses or who have been in business for fewer than 7 years. In addition, we sponsor workshops that teach businesses financial and technical skills and support wellness and mental health initiatives to address issues that may impact the mindset and successfulness of creative entrepreneurs. We also host events to showcase local artists and creatives and provide a social hub for the community. We opened our co-working space post-COVID and are meeting now with businesses and artists who may be interested in spaces. So please reach out if you are looking for co-working space in Upham's Corner. We are soon to have our first art gallery opening in the DNICB space at the end of this year with a local artist photographer, Jordan Christopher. There are many more workshops and events upcoming, and we look forward to welcome you to FIL. I guess that's it. I can tell you a little bit more about our partnerships, but I don't know if we have enough time for that. So do I pass it on to the next person, Andrew?
Thank you, Maria. Deb Foley was going to update us on the Upham's branch of the Boston Public Library. And if I can just remind our panelists and speakers to take a break, a pause for our interpreters, and speak slowly. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Deb Foley. I am the children's librarian at the Boston Public Library Upham's Corner branch, and I would like to share with you some of our exciting exhibits and programs that are happening right now and in December. We are very excited to have the photography of J. Pix Belmer hanging in the library right now. They have an exhibit called Bird Street, standing for Building Individuals Reconstructing Dorchester, and the photos beautifully display the diversity of the Upham's Corner neighborhood. So I would invite everyone to come to the library and see this amazing photography exhibit. We are also excited to have a jewelry making workshop tomorrow evening, which will be at the library, so in person, and it is for adults and teens beginning at 6:30. So for all those who are
wanting to create, please stop by and we can, we'll be having materials such as wire and different types of beads in which to make those jewelry items. We also have a monthly spice club that each month we hand out spices. People come and pick up spices. November, we will be handing out turmeric and ginger, and people go home with those spices and information and recipes and experiment and come together on a Thursday evening to talk about those spices and what they have been doing with them. We're very excited to be partnering with the Russell School. They're having an equitable literacy project that creates a pop-up library in the school each month. So we're giving them books for the month on different cultures. In November, we concentrated on Diwali and the Indian culture. So we are working with them to have that pop-up library each month for the students for all the grades. And finally, in December, we're very excited that the Friends of the Library is sponsoring our annual holiday open house. So on December 16th, all day from 12 to 7, we are inviting
Recording in progress.
To come into the library. There'll be music, there'll be vendors, there'll be takeaway food, crafts, and just a time to check out what the library has to offer. Thank you for letting me share some of what's happening at the library right now.
Thank you very much, Deb, and other presenters who updated us on the different elements of the Arts and Innovation District. Before we get into the real meat of the presentation, which is an update on the RFPs, I'm going to briefly go to the next slide and just update folks at a very high level on a few different development projects in Upham's Corner within the Arts and Innovation District. The first project that I'll just share a little bit of information on is the DNI CB building, also known as Columbia Crossing. And the news to share there is that POA and Dorchester Bay Economic Development Corporation are working hard to advance the Article 80 and other permitting processes for their Columbia Crossing project at the former Citizens Bank on this map that is Site 3. The project will include approximately 62 income restricted residential units, along with arts and innovation space in support of the city's arts and innovation district. The development team will be working on community outreach, permitting, and financing in 2022, with the goal of beginning construction in 2023. The next project, it's right next to it, is Foxhall. As many folks know, the Article 80, which is the development agency's review process for projects, is ongoing, and they are looking to restart their community process in December. The next project that is kind of in the middle of the screen is an update on the Pierce building. Dorchester Bay is currently undertaking a historic renovation of the Pierce building. The renovation includes repairing the historic facade, replacing and/or repairing the windows, improving the American with Disability accessibility, including a new accessible entrance on Columbia Road, and retrofitting the historic elevator and a systems upgrade within the building. The work has begun, is ongoing, and is expected to be complete by October of 2022. And the last update that I'll share is from the Transportation Department and Streets from the city. The news from them is they're seeking to hire a dedicated planner to take the lead in a visioning and community process for the length of Columbia Road. They are hoping to have someone on board to kick off that process within the coming year of 2022. The end result of that will be a conceptual design plan for the roadway that would ultimately lead to a reconstruction plan. That is likely 3 to 5 years away. But as we talk a little bit about the timeline and now shift to the next slide and think about where we've been, and then later on, I'll return and talk about where we're going in the future. Although sometimes 3 to 5 years feels like a long time, in the scale of change and the type of things that we're talking about here, it's not that far off. So on that note, particularly on timeline, I'd like to pass the microphone respectively to my friend and colleague, John Smith.
Thank you, Andrew. So if you came on at the beginning, you saw we were showing some pictures, capturing different moments in this process that began in September 2017 and is ongoing. So, there were some key points along the way, but we, in January 2018, the WAG and other stakeholders had a public meeting talking about what they've heard and what they learned in terms of, designing and visioning this arts and innovation district and, the use of all the public space and things like that. And it moved on to like May 2018, when there was a public meeting to talk through all the development scenarios. And in summer of 2019, there was an RFI and they solicited some partners, and then things sort of died down at that point, in terms of engaging the community for a while. And then sort of COVID hit, and next slide. And so we moved into a more virtual setting for our meetings. And so the WAG meetings resumed in November 2020. And during that time in November, we had some community meetings, and then the first RFP was issued, DNI issued the first RFP for what we call DNICP, the Citizens Bank Building, Columbia Crossing, was issued in December of 2020, which sort of leads us up. And, there were community meetings, the proposals were evaluated from March to May. We settled on some developers, and which sort of leads us into now. So right now, we have the city who have issued their RFPs, September, October. And we will be going through that process again. So starting with this community meetings, and we will build out next steps in terms of the development of the rest of the spaces and buildings and so forth. So just wanted to give sort of a context, in terms of using this timeline for all the work that has happened and how this process played out. And just making sure that people know that there's been lots of discussions and lots of thinking and for what this area is supposed to look like and who it's supposed to serve. So with that, we'll move on. Andrew.
Thank you very much, John, for that. I see there was a question around the Leon building, and we can't see it in this slide. It's kind of in the lower left, but the question was, is there any idea that the owner might be interested or selling or redeveloping? And I don't have the slide in front of me, but certainly that has been discussed as something that is sometimes, on the market quietly. And so it's, I think, in that spirit that we included on the slide, potential redevelopment is how it was characterized. The city does not have any active conversations going on with any entity, but there have been over certainly pre-COVID and even during COVID, a few different entities that have come forward with some ideas or thoughts for how it might be redeveloped. So, okay, so now shifting to this slide that is in front of us, and the fourth component of our update tonight, we're gonna move into the RFPs, which we last sort of discussed. Now, I think our last community meeting was in May. So some time has gone on since we last met. This graphic may be familiar to some folks. What we see here in the red-orange color, the portion, the parcel on the left-hand side is labeled as Site 2, the municipal lot. We'll have some folks tell us about that RFP. And then Site 1, which is where the Strand Theater is, the former Bank of America, and the parking lot that's next to them is the other site that we're going to hear more about. As John Smith just referenced, these RFPs have been in the works for multiple years. We started in 2017, and the language, which can be found on the city's website, the actual RFPs. They are public documents. If you'd like to see them, they have been out and released since late September and early October. The first one for Site 1 has been issued by the BPDA, Boston Planning and Development Agency, and that seeks an operator for the Strand Theater, and the redevelopment of that Bank of America and parking lot. And then the second one, which has been issued by the Department of Neighborhood Development within the city. And that is currently a parking lot. Both sites anticipate and are premised on development without displacement. The Strand Theater will remain owned by the city. That will not change. We are seeking someone to operate it. And as the RFPs explain, and we'll hear from our colleagues, are open to creative ideas. And then the Bank of America and the parking lot are anticipated as the location for a new library on the ground floor. We'll see a little bit more in a few slides on that. And then we'll see what the respondents to the RFPs bring us. But included in the RFP is a request for affordable commercial space there and affordable housing. And lastly, on Site 2, parking must continue to be a use on that site. And so we'll have someone explain to us the different elements of that. But in addition to parking, the RFPs state there's a desire and need for affordable commercial space, and then the potential for a small amount of affordable housing there. So I'm now going to pass the microphone to my colleagues who will tell us about more details, greater details on the first RFP. That's Kit.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Kit Binns. I'm a member of the Working Advisory Group, and I live right behind the Strand. And these are these goals that are listed here are really the distillation of all the work that has gone on over these 4 years. And I think it's important just to read them right out, because these words were carefully crafted and are what we used whenever we did anything with respect to creating these RFPs, and also because I think this is useful for our interpreters. So the goals: development without displacement that supports the arts and innovation district, affordable housing and commercial space, reinvigorated Strand Theater operations and a new Upham's branch library, a hub of creativity to bolster collaboration among local residents, entrepreneurs, and business owners. And I would just like to add that when you looked at the timeline that John Smith described, and you heard Andrew mention that we worked on these for 4 years, really. It was a combination of all those meetings, including many public meetings that sometimes had a special point of view. For example, one for the library, one for the Strand, and one for housing, that helped come up with the many specific requirements that we put into the RFPs, and that are quite lengthy, these RFPs. But these are the points that we were always looking to go back to. And there's the RFPs themselves will give further description of these goals, further sense of what they really mean. But it's also the case that it's not just all the meetings and on breakpoints that John Smith was showing. The Working Advisory Group met at least monthly most of these years, often every other week or twice a month, I guess, in busy times, and occasionally somewhat less. But so there's been a great deal of effort that went into this, all of which was being supported by and led by what we found from the meetings. So with that, I don't remember who goes next.
It's still you, Kit.
It is. What do I have to do now?
Just advance the slide, Sarah.
Oh, okay, I didn't know I was going to do that part. Okay. So this is the description of the site, and some of this has already been described, that it's a combined RFP for three quite different things. One is the Strand itself, which, as Andrew mentioned, will be looking for a new operator, someone who has professional experience in this, but who can live up to our requirements that there be a heavily local slant to how this is used, as well as how to draw a larger audience from the region. Then to the left of that is the old Bank of America and its parking lot, which will be redeveloped as a combination of a new library and a commercial and housing development above it, heavily income restricted to make it affordable. And this is a really unusual plan because it's going to be combining the city's library with housing that is then a separate entity. And this is an unusual, in fact, I guess unique for this city plan. I think that covers what we needed to say in there. I thought I had one more thing to say there, but I can't remember what it is. So let's just move on. This is still me, I guess, huh?
No, this is
This
now.
is me, Kit.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Kit.
Thanks, Kit. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Strand Theater portion of the RFP. As Kit and Andrew mentioned, the Strand Theater is a part of this Site 1 request for proposals. And the idea is that we want to encourage all of the possible ways that the new library and housing development can be designed with the theater in mind. And that could be through programs or physical design. So the city is offering a 10-year lease with potential options to renew the lease in the future. The theater will remain city-owned, and Andrew mentioned that. And we have the expectation, and we know that the community has the expectation, that the city will continue to be deeply involved in the operations and programming of the space. We also know that performing arts groups are still coming out of COVID-19. They've been one of the hardest hit industries in the United States by the pandemic and by all of the closures. So we've added language to the RFP to take that into account. And it lets respondents tell us how they want to approach operations in the theater, including some options for how they can ramp up their operations over time. And that's the point that you see here about being open to various operating or phasing scenarios. So for example, an operating partner could start with seasonal programming, summer programs, and then build up their capacity to take on more of the theater operations over time, for example, over a 5-year period. Next slide. And here are the goals for the theater. And these are as defined by the community and through this process, through this planning process. We're looking for an operating partner that can maintain and grow affordability and accessibility of Strand Theater programs for local audiences. Someone who can provide programming that reflects the diverse audiences in Upham's Corner. We want to continue to use the theater as a platform for youth and workforce opportunities. And we want to encourage a wide variety of kinds of programs and events, different disciplines and different kinds of events in the theater. And then lastly, we want to make sure that the theater continues to be affordable to local artists and local groups that want to rent the space or bring their programs there. And we've also, at the end of the slide here, you can see increasing visibility of what's happening in the theater, making sure that everyone knows when something's happening and what's going on, making sure that we take advantage of all of the spaces in the theater in new and creative ways, using the lobbies and the gallery. And then, of course, making sure that there's community oversight and participation. So we've also emphasized that we're all very excited for the idea of a Strand Theater that can be a hub and a launch pad for local talent, especially for local BIPOC artists, and that there really is an important and necessary role for the community to play in overseeing the future programming at the theater. And with that, I think I'm passing it back to Andrew.
Thank you so much, Chief. So earlier this evening, I mentioned the library and promised that we'd see some images. For those who were with us at the May meeting, the president of the library, David Leonard, had shared a few different possible approaches to the library. And it was based on that meeting, as well as with guidance from the mayor, at that time, Mayor Janey, that we, with the WAG, moved forward with the recommendation of a library on the ground floor with housing above. And this RFP that we've been describing puts forward that model. These conceptual pictures are not the design. However, what they do show is the first 2 floors featuring that branch library. And certainly, as we'll hear shortly, moving forward when these responses are due, we're going to see hopefully a variety of different approaches to how this request can be responded to through hopefully different development proposals. This represents what we think is a likely possibility and starts to show a little bit of the height and scale and massing, but this is not a design. This is just a concept. So we're going to advance now to RFP Site 2. And we are now going to have the dynamic duo of Alita Warren, who's a WAG member, as well as Kirsten Stidlin, who is on staff at the Department of Neighborhood Development, share presenting this RFP.
Hello, this is the municipal parking lot that's located behind Brothers grocery store off of Hamlet Street. There are 3 key development objectives for this site. Parking. Proposals must provide an adequate amount of parking to serve the needs of any uses they propose for the building, as well as 1 for replacement of existing parking spaces in municipal lot 19, which is approximately 88 spaces. So what that means is if they put in housing that people would have a parking spot with their housing, then that would be included. If somebody put in a shop, they would have to add additional spaces that would accommodate whatever shop or business they put into the building proposal. The second is to provide affordable commercial space for the neighborhood. There are plans to work between DSNI and Upham's Corner Main Street and the city to identify commercial tenants that are highly desired by the neighborhood. These businesses and commercial partners are meant to plan appropriate size spaces that would accommodate the needs of existing businesses and attract new businesses to the Arts and Innovation District. And lastly, there are plans in this section for affordable housing. The inclusion of permanently affordable housing for both rental and ownership is critical to the Upham's Corner community and to promoting mixed-use, mixed-income neighborhoods. While this is not the primary purpose of this site, a portion of the site can and maybe should accommodate housing with sizing that relates to the scale of the residential structures along Hamlet Street. So let's move on to the next slide so we can look at that. So you can see in the images along the bottom here, this is the top image is a close-up of the aerial view of the Hamlet Street parking lot, and then you can see some images of what the street looks like with trees and houses all along the edges, and it backs up along a set of apartment and commercial spaces along Columbia Road along Hamlet Street. And I believe, and the site is behind Brothers Market, CVS, and the Pierce Building. So you can see the Pierce Building is kind of underneath arrow number, kind of behind arrow number 1. Brothers Market is kind of in between arrows number 3 and number 2 and number 1. And CVS is on the corner, kind of across from the Pierce Building next to Brothers Market. I think I'm going to hand it off to Kirsten. So next slide, please.
Thanks, Lita. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the specific design guidelines that were included in the RFP. Since there are different uses that are being considered, the design of how those uses are composed is very important due to the location of the site. The design has to contribute to the creation of a new public realm in the center of Upham's Corner, and that connects to the pedestrian community and activity on Columbia Road. We've asked that developers incorporate things like public art and lighting, perhaps murals and other historic components. As Alita said, one of the requirements is that the 88 parking spaces that are currently on the site and are free because it's a municipal parking site must be replaced in some way in that same amount. And there'll be additional parking for the new uses that are proposed. And we've asked in the design guidelines that parking on the ground floor be screened so that it's more visually appealing, and that the sidewalk and the street edge connections surrounding the site need to be accessible and produce a safe public realm. I think that that's it in terms of the design guidelines. Andrew, back to you, I believe.
Thank you very much, Kirsten and Alita. And we're almost done with our presentation. What I will now kind of pick up on where John Smith left off is we're at the center here, November 17th, this community meeting and Arts and Innovation District update. We heard John tell us a little bit about, and I've referenced a couple times this night, the last time we had a community meeting, which was in May 25th, where David Leonard presented the different library options, and we talked about that. Since that time, we issued the RFPs, and you heard me reference each of them. And we also held a virtual bidders conference, as well as an in-person bidders conference. And those were opportunities for anyone, but in particular for potential developers, cultural organizations, potential operators of the Strand, affordable housing, community development corporations, architects, designers, people who are interested in responding to these RFPs showed up. And what we found at both of those events is we had between 30 and 50, sometimes virtual, sometimes in person, interested parties attend these. And we are still in the midst of the preparation period. No one has submitted any responses to these RFPs. Those are due in a little over a month. The two RFPs were issued almost simultaneously, just a couple of days after each other. And they can be responded to either together or individually, but they are both due on December 23rd. I'd encourage, if anyone wants more information on the RFPs, how to respond to them, that information can be found on the website of both the Department of Neighborhood Development and the BPDA Boston Planning and Development Agency, or you can, by all means, reach out to me. After that time, there'll be a little break, and likely, right after the first of the year, probably more towards the end of January, once we have gone through and made sure the proposals are complete and have all the material, they comply with the spirit of the RFP, then we will certainly, with the WAG, come back to you, the community, and there will be opportunities for developers, anyone who has submitted a viable a proposal to present that to the community. And I would expect that those would begin taking place over the course of winter of 2022. And it's going to take some time, likely depending on how many proposals we have. It may take a couple months. The goal then is maybe in the spring, maybe late spring, early summer, to have made a selection of a developer or developers and an operator, and there'll continue to be community engagement. The pace and frequency of how often we meet will be determined by, I guess, how many proposals we have, how much content there is, and a fair and equitable, can't just rush it all. So we'll know more when we get the responses on sort of how much time we need to digest and process and consider them. So not the end by any means. There certainly will be a call to action and a request to continue to stay involved. Likely in January, I assume we'll still be doing this virtually. Hopefully, maybe at some point we'll return to in person when public health deems it safe for us to do that. But for the time being, we'll continue to do this virtually. On that note, I think we are going to now shift gears. And I know I've seen some questions. Sarah, we can go to the next slide. And now entertain, I believe some colleagues have collected the written questions. Maybe we can have somebody read them. And then there's a whole host of WAG members, city folks, and if appropriate, and folks want to ask their question, or if we get through all these questions and then folks want to ask additional questions, we're certainly here to do just that. So.
So we have been collecting the questions, and there was one question that was answered in the chat, which was Marty asked about whether the city would be continue to be involved in the funding of the Strand for capital needs, and Cara responded, "We will continue supporting facility costs at the theater and have a capital needs assessment in the pipeline. We will know more details once we have a sense of what the new operating partner will need from the space. And we will also definitely be partners in fundraising and grant seeking." We also had a question about if we have received proposals from developers to pick up the RFP, which I believe Andrew has already answered. And then the most recent question is there an email list or a newsletter that we can sign up for? Somebody found out about it through Facebook, but wants to know if there's a better way to stay involved.
Hi, Alita. This is Morgan McDaniel from the Boston Planning Development Agency. I just dropped a link in the chat. We send out email updates whenever a meeting is coming up. So you can click the link, bostonplans.org/about-us/get-involved. It gives you a bunch of options, but you can just click on Dorchester and you'll always receive an email a week or two before the meeting is going to happen.
Great, thank you. So there's another question about the parking spaces. Somebody is curious what is being done to ensure that local residents can maintain their ability to park for free. Well, there was mention of 88 spots being maintained. We haven't really clarified in what capacity. And so people are concerned.
I can try to speak to that one, Alita. It's a specific requirement, as we said in the RFP, that all 88 spaces be replaced on a one-to-one basis and that they continue to be operated for free to the public. So that's one of the baseline requirements for anybody responding to that, to RFP for Site 2.
Great.
And anyone that does not include that in their proposal will fit into the category Andrew mentioned of it being considered non-compliant. So it's a required thing.
Now we have had one
All
more
right,
question.
Alita, if I could just expand on that. The city goes into this, and I'd say the WAG, certainly we've had discussions about this, that's the requirement in the RFP. We know and are aware that to achieve that is going to require some form of development, and even with that development, there may need to be some additional support in the form of subsidy or assistance, maybe American Recovery Program Act, so like infrastructure dollars, because this is parking. To build structured parking costs money. We are not entertaining, although if the developer or an entity wants to propose it, more power to them, but the expectation has not been that this would be below grade parking, but that it likely would be above grade parking. And just to build that costs money. So, it will be part of the ongoing discussion, how we help pay and support that so that it can be maintained as parking available, for residents, and to support the Strand and to support, the balance of businesses in Upham's Corner.
Okay, so there's some questions about when we anticipate the construction, and I think this is actually two questions. The first one might be the Strand itself, the capital projects for the Strand, and the second one being the building where the library is going to be installed. So what is our long-term timeline for that?
Sure. So I mentioned a little bit of this earlier, that John talked about, looking back 3 or 4 years. And we've certainly been having conversations and had met in person for a couple of years, even before the pandemic. And we're at a point now. It's a moment. It's an exciting moment to have these RFPs out, but it still is going to take time. These projects, there's a commitment from the city of over $18 million to go to the library. That will help advance that project, which we'll see what comes forward from developers, but to create affordable commercial space and affordable housing requires additional support and subsidies. And those as you heard Kirsten from Department of Neighborhood Development mention, there are funding cycles when state resources are available and when city resources, and there are a few different areas, as well as philanthropic, foundations and such. There may be likely a number of different sources to help pay for and support this type of housing, but that takes time. So that's a long way of saying, if we're in a place where we have a developer selected, ideally in the spring, they'll need to go through the approvals process, which in Boston is referred to as Article 80, and that can take 6 months to a year or more. I'd say, given all the work that's been done, we'd hope that could be done, in a shorter period of time. But once that entitlement and the zoning approvals, all of that stuff takes place, you can do a little bit of work on the funding, but they need to know that there's a viable, approved project. And then those funding cycles, could add another, the funding and financing might add another 9 months or 12 months. So we could very realistically be out another 1.5 to 2 years before you start to see construction beginning. And then for projects of this scale and complexity, as you've seen, throughout the city, you probably can expect about that same amount of time to build it. So another 3 to 5 years, we might have the library sooner than that, but something in that range, I believe.
Thank you, Andrew. So there are a couple questions here, one of which I can answer. Working Advisory Group, that's WAG. WAG stands for Working Advisory Group. The next one is, what will happen if nobody responds to the RFPs?
We shed some tears because there's been a lot of, it's been a labor of love and a lot of work. If that's the case, and it's always possible, I'm not going to say it's not possible, then we will dust off ourselves and figure out how to move forward.
Kit wants to say something about that.
Yes, I'd like to respond to that. I think this is a very complicated process, and it's really important that people understand that it's a dance between us in the community who want something, and then the practical measure of having that happen, because it all requires subsidies. So when we had to keep that in mind as we develop these RFPs, that we can't ask for something that's impossible. We can ask for as much as we can hope for. And so presumably that if we did that correctly, then we should get appropriate RFPs. But as Andrew said, there's no guarantee of that.
Yes, unfortunately, that all sounds true. I am very hopeful we will get some. There is another question, because there's been so much more traffic due to the Van Gogh exhibit, it's made it apparent that Upham's Corner needs restaurants and parking to support the Strand. Somebody expressed that they had 4 people stop them looking for restaurants. Are there any plans for targeting restaurants for commercial space? A partial answer to that is we already have one restaurant slated. Bipla Rai and Kwazi Kwa and Nayako Pearl Perry are starting Comfort Kitchen in the Comfort Station, which is next to the Dorchester North Burying Ground. I don't know beyond that. I will have to pass that off to somebody else.
The need for restaurants and other commercial that supports and bolsters the Arts and Innovation District, sorry, my camera was off, is something that's been discussed throughout our process. And while these, the parcels that we discussed in the RFPs, the library likely will take most of the ground floor of that. There certainly are examples of, amenities in libraries now. We'll see what the library, and there'll be a whole public process as part of designing that library when we have proposals in front of us. That space will be reserved for the library. I think it's unlikely that would be a place for, I don't want to mislead people, that's a place for restaurants, but certainly these other projects that have been discussed across the street at the CB building, the former Citizens Bank building that DSNI has, is a potential place for new affordable commercial space that supports the Arts and Innovation District. I mentioned in the development overview, Fox Hall previously has had restaurants in there, and as part of that redevelopment, Certainly there's a commitment to help support businesses that contribute to the Arts and Innovation District. And so that commercial space is potentially available for those types of uses as well. I welcome other either city folks or WAG members to chime in on the question as well.
I was just going to add, Andrew, that and I don't think Val is on the call, but we've been coordinating with Main Streets, Upham's Corner Main Streets, and also providing information to patrons at the Strand about where they can go locally. So I think it's a good conversation to keep happening, and it's good to be able to show demand for local restaurants in the area, but definitely something that we should be following up on as part of the, what worked or what needs are we learning about from having that many folks coming to the theater.
Yeah, thank you, Cara. Valeska or Val is not able to be here tonight, but she is on the working advisory group. And then as was mentioned, I think by Alita, BPLA is also on the advisory group. So it's front and center, certainly of many of our conversations.
I think we might have got through all the questions. Are there any more questions? Feel free to put them in the chat.
While we're allowing time for people to have questions, just want to say thank you, Sarah. Maybe we can go to the next slide, which I think says that. Yeah. We're going to take a break. We won't have any community meetings definitely until 2022, but you can expect to hear from the same way that you heard about this meeting. Hopefully it might be through social media. Maybe there'll be flyers. Maybe you'll hear it from your neighbors or Facebook, or you'll get an email. But hopefully you will hear. We hopefully will be looking at really exciting responses to these RFPs.
So there is one last question about how we are working to create parking that's a little bit closer to the Strand. For some people, walking from behind Brothers Supermarket might be a bit of a stretch, and so there is some worry about accessibility and parking for the Strand.
Well, I can say that this isn't like adding parking lots closer to the Strand, but we are talking to the transportation office about making sure that we have good loading and drop-off points as a part of the planning around Columbia Road. So we're still at the beginning of that conversation, but we know particularly for folks with disabilities or just anyone who just, that one block walk isn't as doable, as well as things like ride share, drop off and pick up. There's still a need for making sure that that kind of space is available on the street. So that's one thing that we are looking into.
This is a little bit more of a comment than a question, but somebody is wondering about investments in public transit. And I believe that this was addressed earlier in the meeting. Andrew mentioned that the Department of Transportation is doing a study of Columbia Road altogether to try to address some transportation needs.
The other piece that I would add to that, since that's roadway, and certainly going back, many years now to the work on the Fairmont corridor and the city's interest even before Imagine Boston 2030, which was the city's first master plan in over 50 years, for which this is one of the outcomes of it. But this community has been talking about transit equity and investment in the Fairmont line. And, much of this commitment from the city and, these acquisitions moving forward, putting our money where our mouth is and committing to development without displacement is rooted in those continued investments and pressure, on greater frequency of the Fairmont line, new cars on the Fairmont line, improvements to the infrastructure, the rail, everything, all of the above to support that. And, parity, equal fare to other types of rapid transit system. Is something that many, many people for a long, long time have been working on. So this work builds upon and supports and hopefully bolsters that work moving forward.
So there is one last question here about safety in the neighborhood, because some of it about walking from the parking lot to the Strand is also a matter of safety. And there has been some work done by Val Daly with the city and our local beat officers to try to address some of the neighborhood safety concerns. It's too bad that she's not on the call. But I think one of the things that's happening as we build traffic and volume in the city, and I say this as somebody who works in a school and I want to make sure that our children are safe as well, is that the more people are coming and going in a neighborhood, the less likely it is for scary things to congregate. The more we are using it, the less the scary uses it. If anyone else would like to address that, feel free.
I would just echo what you said, Alita, and I do know that Valeska Daly, along with, I believe it's Ilias from Dorchester Bay, have been meeting quite regularly. This is something that, again, this is not new, those concerns. During the pandemic, there have been additional challenges that have arisen around activity that occurs at the edges of that parking lot or directly adjacent to it. Certainly the goal of putting development, on it and near it will hopefully move us towards more eyes, more ears, more people, more activity that helps dissuade and discourage that type of activity. So we're at 7:35 p.m. and I just, again, want to reiterate how thankful and how much we appreciate everyone being here tonight. Stay tuned, there's more to come. There will be calls for action. Hopefully we have many exciting responses and things to look at as a community together. I don't know if anyone else, John or Kara or anyone else wants to say any parting comments, but
just thanks to everyone for joining us on a Wednesday night when it gets dark now at 4 p.m. and it feels like midnight at 7 p.m. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, same here. I really want to thank everybody for participating and being on. And as Andrew said, please stay tuned and please stay engaged. Thank you.
We will have this recording available. There's two places, one likely on the BPDA, the Boston Planning and Development's website. We have something that carries all of the meetings, and you can go there if you just search for Upham's Corner implementation process. You'll be able to find the WAG members, records, all the presentations, and we'll likely upload this there, as well as on the City of Boston's website. If you search for the same thing, Arts and Innovation District in Upham's Corner, you'll see a very similar record of all of our meetings, the presentations, and we'll have this presentation there. Thank you all. Oh. There are those links. And we're going to see what we can do about that. There's a question about would it be possible to make the participants list viewable so we all know how many people are here and who. If we were in the same room, we'd all say, I know, it's horrible. Yeah, I'm sorry if it's private. I can't even see. I can tell we had at our peak around 66 or 67 people, and there's now around 45. And I should have led with that. We apologize. We had started with the very good intention of having, not to make it difficult for people, but to have some way of gathering that information and having a registration and encouraging people to ask questions. And our technical savvy just did not deliver. So I apologize for that. Hopefully, as we continue doing this, we'll continue to work out the kinks on that. So, all right. It would be nice. I think we're going to end. Good night, everyone. Thank you.